Hi, I'm Doug Van Eaton. Been with Schweser for about 15 years now and been involved in CFA education seriously for about 20 years now and had my charter for about 30 years now. So I feel a bit qualified to address the title here, How to Pass the Level 1 CFA Exam. We thought we'd make the title simple so you wouldn't have to wonder, gee, what's that video about? So, what am I going to cover here for you? Well, here's a partial list anyway. We're going to take a look at the CFA curriculum. What's the structure of the curriculum, the content, how it's put together, what topics we'll have at level 1, and the exam weights for the various topic areas. Visit briefly, as way of motivation, historical pass rates on the level 1 CFA exam. Then we'll look at the actual structure of the exam and the question format. So take a good look at what you'll face on exam day. And then we'll move to how to prepare for and pass the exam, some advice from our years of working with tens of thousands of CFA candidates, and talk about efficient and effective study with Schweser, what we've put together from our knowledge of CFA study, CFA exams, but also from learning science, and how we've put that together into our Schweser study system. Well, the level 1 curriculum, there are 19 study sessions. This is the way that it's broken up. 19 study sessions, each consisting of one or more readings. So readings make up a study session, and then these study sessions make up topic areas. So these learning outcome statements, every question on the level 1 CFA exam will be based on the required knowledge, skill, etc. of one or more of these learning outcome statements. There's approximately 60 readings and 530 learning outcome statements that comprise the curriculum for the level 1 CFA exam. These numbers change slightly each year as the CFA curriculum is updated, things change. So let's take a look at a study session. This is study session 2, Quantitative Methods. There's 4 readings here, as you can see. First one, time value of money, some discounted cash flow applications. Then we move into statistical concepts and market returns, and finally, probability concepts. So if we break this down a little more, we'll take a look at the LOSs. But study session 2 and study session 3, the second part of quantitative methods, make up this topic area of quantitative methods. So that's one of the topic areas. And this quantitative methods will be approximately 10% of the exam questions and 10% of the points available on the exam. So each reading, each of those individual readings has one or more learning outcome statements associated with it. And as an example, let's look at the actual LOSs for reading 7, discounted cash flow applications. And they all start off, candidates should be able to. Well, the first one is calculate and interpret the net present value and the internal rate of return of an investment. So pretty well-defined skill that you must have right there. The second LOS, B here, contrast the net present value rule to the internal rate of return rule and identify problems associated with the IRR rule. And C, calculate and interpret a holding period return or total return. That gives you an idea about these LOSs for each reading. So the purpose of these reading level learning outcome statements, one, they focus you on the relevant material. When you look at the overall curriculum books, some of that may not be required by the LOSs. In our Schweser materials, we focused exclusively on the LOSs, on the required knowledge for the exam. And often they'll indicate the skill you should get from the reading. Remember, calculate the net present value or the internal rate of return of investment. We saw that. Indicate the depth of topic knowledge required, and especially with the command words. Look for the command word calculate. Well, that tips you off that you should be ready to do a calculation there. Other ones are describe, compare, compare and contrast, explain. All these are your command words, and you can find a list of those command words and their definition at the CFA Institute website. And each exam question, as I mentioned, is going to be based on one or more LOSs. The curriculum, and thus these learning outcome statements and exam questions, all begin with what they call the candidate body of knowledge. This is what they think a generalist analyst needs to know. And it's based on feedback from employers and practitioners. And then these learning outcomes, they're tested on some sort of a cycle. The thing to remember is any learning outcome statement, the requirements of that are fair game for the exam. We can't point to one and say, this is not going to be on the exam. Now, some of these learning outcome statements, like how to calculate the net present value, well, that comes up in various areas of the curriculum, and we know they're almost certain that will be tested. But other ones, you don't know, but that means you can't really skip any of them to be properly prepared and to maximize your probability of passing the level 1 exam. So here's the topic areas. We looked at Quantitative Methods, study session 2 and 3. There's 2 study sessions on economics. There's 4 study sessions on accounting, financial reporting and analysis. We've got a couple on corporate finance, a couple on portfolio management and equity investments. We've got fixed income securities, derivatives, alternative investments, and this one right here, ethical and professional standards, which is a little bit different than the others in some respects, which we'll touch on. But let's look at the weights. Keep this in mind going into the study, going into your review, when you're working on practice exams, the whole way. Okay? The 2 I've put in red here are the largest exam weights, 15% on ethics or standards of professional conduct, and financial reporting and analysis. And then we've got a bunch of 10s, right? Quantitative methods, econ, corporate finance. Portfolio is only 6%, although there's a fair amount of material in there. Equity, 11%, 2 study sessions, 13 and 14. Fixed income, 11%. Derivative, 6%, and finally alternative investments, 6%. So keep those exam weights in mind during your study. Pass rates. Well, here's the motivational part. In recent years, the percentage of candidates who passed their exams has averaged 43%. It's been very not much variation around that level of 43%. But remember, 43% is the percentage of registered candidates who actually sat for the exam. Those that registered told themselves they could study, intended to study, really intended to study, but just really didn't get it done and don't show up for the exam for whatever reason. They're not counted in here. So it's not 43% of those who registered, but 43% of those who actually sat for the exam. And this includes candidates taking the level 1 exam for the second or third or whatever time. And we really don't know how many of those there are and what their pass rates are compared to the first-time takers. So it's difficult. Clearly it's difficult. Just about everybody has finished their undergraduate degree. They should know how to study. They have studied. They have taken tests, and they have been successful to some extent. And yet this pass rate is quite low. Well, why is that? Are the questions themselves, are the LOSs that difficult? Well, no, they aren't really. But look at how broad this exam is. I really doubt any of you have ever taken a 6-hour exam covering this many different topics. Certainly doesn't come up at the university level in my experience, because we've got ethics, we've got quant, we've got fixed income, equities, portfolio, alternative investments, all the accounting stuff. So we just sometimes describe the level 1 curriculum as about this broad and about this deep. And then you get deeper in some of these areas risk and valuation and derivatives markets and accounting for acquisitions and all this. You get more deeply into those at level 2 in preparation for using those concepts and knowledge at level 3. So the level 1 exam, how is it structured? There are 3 hours in each section. There's a morning session and there's an afternoon session. There'll be 120 questions and on each one will cover all the topics in approximately those topic weights. So it's not like you can say, oh, they didn't test fixed income in the morning, I better study it at lunch. Nope, they hit all the topics in both sessions of the exam. And you must take both sessions. We got an email one time about a week before the exam from a candidate who said, well, I hear that the morning session is often more difficult than the afternoon session. Should I take that one or should I just take the afternoon session? Well, we were really tempted to tell him just take the afternoon session, but it turns out that you're expected to be there for both halves of the exam. All multiple choice questions, all 3 answer choices. So probability says you get a 33% if you didn't know anything. So that's kind of a baseline. So if your practice exam scores start out about 42%, well, that's just not that much above 33%. So be aware of that. We haven't seen old exams. We haven't seen an actual exam since 1997. They don't distribute them at all anymore. I mentioned this. Both the morning and afternoon sessions cover all the topics in their topic weights, and they're divided, or at least historically have been divided by topic area. So you might start off and say, well, here's some ethics questions, here's some quant questions, here's some econ questions, here's some accounting questions, topic by topic. Some exam tips. Well, I've taken a lot of exams in my day, and I suggest you come early, do everything to stay calm, and try to be well rested, well nourished. Okay? It's just put the odds in your favor. So know where you're going, know where you're going to park. Leave adequate time. And I guess I would add to this, I don't like to enter the exam rooms until the exact last minute because everybody is tense at big exams, whether it's this one or other big exams, and sitting around for 20 minutes staring at all these people getting nervous and everything doesn't do anything for you. So I try to slide in right at the end, very calm, early, know where I'm supposed to be. Don't let your eyes wander around the room. This is so important with this exam. If a proctor thinks your eyes were wandering, you may have your exam results invalidated. And there's really no way to prove it and say, oh, my eyes didn't wander, or, gee, I looked over this way, but I didn't look down. So just if you need to look up and take a break, or if you need to take a break, look up like this. You'll stay out of trouble. When the proctors say pencils down or time, stop immediately. If you had some answers in your booklet and you haven't got them on your answer sheet yet and you're trying to hurry and grab 20 seconds after the exam to fill in the bubbles, they may just boot your exam. Happens every time at exam centers around the world. Don't let your eyes wander. Stop immediately when the proctors say time, just like this. Read the Standards of Practice Handbook one more time the day before the exam. That's got all the standards and guidance for the standards and examples of applying it. Now you would think, I'm an ethical person, I can do this. That's not the way it is. It's very specific and it's really in your short-term memory. So certainly you should study it and practice questions over the course of your study, but I suggest the day before the exam is no time to learn derivatives formulas again. Either you've got it or you haven't. But that standards of practice, that ethics, is 15% of the exam, and there's no math on it. So if you can get 15%, reading through that book one more time. It's a couple hundred pages, but it's a small book. You can easily read through it again, including all the examples in a few hours. Remember, that's the first thing you're going to face on the exam in all probability when you go in there. So do it the day before and get as much of that in the specific examples into your short-term memory as you can. Now, there's no scratch paper allowed. There's no formula sheets that you can take into the exam, nothing like that. What you'll get is an exam book, and there'll be adequate room to write on that if you need to set up any calculations or just remind yourself of things. And once they say ready, don't open your exam book before they say start. That'll get you booted out and your exam invalidated. You'll have a short exam day there too. So be careful of that. But as far as I know, you can write anything on that exam book after they say start. And one of the techniques I used to use in graduate school, if there was a formula I knew I was going to have to use or suspected I'd have to use, and I was having trouble remembering it, I'd just write it down when I started my exam. So if I needed the Black-Scholes option pricing formula, I'd look at it 30 minutes before I went into the exam room. When they said start, I'd write that down and have it with me. So, how to prepare for this exam? We've outlined the challenges of the exam. Well, what's the strategy? Okay. Well, in terms of learning and retention, we know some things from learning science, or at least the state of the art. We think we know some things. And one is engaged learning. Two people can tell me, yes, I read the study set, or I read reading 7. Okay. Well, that means a bunch of different things to different people. It's got to be engaged learning. You've got to be fighting for the understanding of those, relating it to stuff you already know. If there's two terms that are similar, trying to learn, well, what's the difference? How am I going to know when it's this and when it's this? Get engaged and work hard during your study, as if you're going to be tested the next day. Keep that in your mind as motivation. Now, repetition and long-term memory. If somebody asks you, what'd you have for lunch yesterday, you could probably tell them. If they ask you what you had for lunch last week on Monday, maybe not. But now think about this. If I ask you now, what'd you have for lunch yesterday, and you told me, and then I called you in another week and said, what'd you have for lunch yesterday, or that day, a week ago? You could probably tell me. And if I did that even once, or certainly if we did it twice 2 weeks later, you might remember what you had for lunch on that day for the rest of the year. And that's the repetition. You see, you've got all this information that comes into your mind, and your mind doesn't know. Most of it, it just sloughs off, right? Everything you've seen during the day, cars, colors, people, phone calls. A lot of that just has to get dropped out of your brain. It can't all be stored, except for some people with actually very odd memories, in that they're so good and they can store so much detail. So some of it's just getting sloughed off. Well, how does your mind know what's important and what's not? Well, if you ask your mind, okay, let's do a question. And this goes to this test effect too, I think. If you ask a question as, what'd you have for lunch yesterday? Your mind starts to think, well, this is important stuff. I better file this away. So repetition can help your long-term memory. And by that, I don't mean reading something twice. I mean reading it and then studying it and then going back and studying it again, doing some questions on it and maybe returning to it again. That kind of repetition increases your retention period for the information. And that's going to be one of your real challenges with the test, right? I studied quant 4 months ago, or I studied this econ stuff 3.5 months ago. And how are you going to remember that all when it comes to the exam date? So that's one of the real challenges. So repetition and revisiting this material will increase your retention period for all of that stuff, hopefully, through exam day. There's something to be said for writing and remembering. Now, in hard evidence, they don't see a high correlation people who studied something and wrote it down, made notes, underlining, didn't change anything. But there's something to be said, and I think it turns out that those people who are able to distill the information and grab the important relationships and then write those down. That's how I used to study. And that worked for me. But I think it's not the writing, because I've never really returned to it and read it, except maybe in the parking lot before a test or something like that. I'd just go through what I had written down. But it's the process of distilling it and understanding it and trying to get a grip on it in order to write it in a brief, concise statement that makes sense to you. It's not so much the writing, but that process of trying to understand it and take the key relationships out of it. I think that can be very helpful. And I mentioned repetition and the importance of review, going back to material that you studied maybe a month prior or 2 months prior. In terms of efficient learning, well, we need to know the extent of the material and the format and topic weights for your exam. Now, we've covered that briefly here, but keep that in mind, knowing the task that's ahead of you. Learn and understand the CFA curriculum, the concepts, definitions, all the bold words, and the techniques, anywhere it says calculate. And do practice quizzes to learn and retain the material. The idea of that test effect that we had on an earlier slide, the test effect has been documented over and over in learning science. And what that says, they took groups and they'd say, okay, everybody study this material. And then they take half the group and they say, well, you restudy this material, and this group, we want you all to take this quiz. Well, people who spent the additional time taking a quiz handily beat, in terms of performance on a later quiz, those who repeatedly studied. There seems to be no doubt about that. And one thing that might surprise you is if you gave them a quiz, but then you didn't give them the answers, you didn't give them answer explanations, nothing, you didn't even grade their quizzes for them, it still helped. Because remember, you're going to your brain and saying, hey, I need to pull this out. Or, gee, I studied this, but how do I use it? How do I get started on a question? And all that really seems to help. And I would say overall, candidates who integrated more question practice into their study have higher pass rates. So learn how to take the exam successfully, and that will come with practice. With practice and practice exams, you'll improve your timing. Remember, you've got an average of 1.5 minutes for each question. Questions you can do faster than that. I consider that, in taking a test, time put in the bank that I can use at the end for maybe really things that I really need to think about and are confusing, and problems that I understand it, but I'm going to have to go the long way around to get there, and it's going to take me longer than average. And then we'll talk about your final preparations, finding the gaps in your knowledge and efficiently filling those in. So here's our 5 steps in the exam preparation process. First off, learn about your exam for your level, its topic weights and question formats. Understand what it is you must accomplish. And remember, what you're going to do on exam day is answer multiple choice questions. On exam day, all the other stuff won't matter. So formulate your study plan with this in mind. Second step, learn the curriculum, one LOS at a time, or one by one. For reading, and then for a study session, and then for a topic area, and then you'll transition to the next topic area. So read the Schweser notes. And complete all our end of reading problems in there, our concept checkers, or I guess now we're module quizzes, I think is what they are on our new learning management system, which I'll discuss shortly. And learn from your errors. If you miss a problem, why did I miss it? What did I need to know that I didn't know? What did I remember incorrectly that caused me to miss this. So every time you miss a question, try and gain from that. Now, we've got video lectures that parallel the book, and they can be used as a supplement. If you really know an area well, if you have an economics degree, maybe you just want to take a look at those videos and take a quiz and say, is that going to be enough? If it's not enough, well, back to the Schweser notes. Attend live online classes or our live instruction classes. And we do this before, kind of compressed before the exam, because candidates typically start later in the exam season than they really should, okay? An earlier start to your studies is always better. Okay? But our live instruction classes, then you're doing the repetition, you're returning to something, and in our live instruction, we really focus on the areas where we think we can add value and help you out, rather than just going over listy stuffs or little outline stuff that candidates don't seem to have that much trouble with. Learn and retain. Well, take quizzes from the Schweser Pro Question Bank and bring in previous topics for review. So maybe you're 2 months into your study, you're studying accounting, financial reporting and analysis, take an econ quiz, take a quant quiz. This going back and this mixing up the topics improves your retention, no doubt about it. If you can, complete all of the end of reading questions in the CFA Institute books. Now, don't struggle and agonize over them, but at least go through each one and understand what they're asking, and some of them are long calculations that probably aren't worth your while, but check the answers. Make sure you know what they've telegraphed as far as how they might test it or how they interpret certain things by reading through those questions at a minimum. And then we have topic assessment tests. So as you're going through the curriculum, you get to the end of quant. Well, I don't want you to study all these and then when you take your first practice exam, say, I got a 48. I studied really hard. I don't know what went wrong. What am I going to do with 5 weeks left before the exam? These topic assessments are more exam-like. Not exactly exam-like, of course, but more exam-like than the end of reading questions, which they're there to make sure you understood each thing. But now you've got to apply them, and sometimes now we can mix in different LOSs, put them together. So these topic assessment exams are to give you feedback on how your study has gone. If you're scoring less than 70 on a topic assessment test, your study just hasn't gone that well, and you're going to have to study, I'm not going to say longer, but with more energy and more focus. Study harder. It's hard work. Number 4, learn how to take the exam. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, we have our Schweser review workshops, which focus on some of the material we think is most challenging to candidates, and some of it we think we're pretty certain is going to show up on the exam. And we've got our Schweser practice exams. I think there'd be 6 exams available overall, 4 in our practice exam books, and something we put together called 101 must-knows for the CFA level exam. We really tried to focus on the core material and things that we really pretty sure you're going to need to know on the exam. And then review the answer explanations. And if you're scoring poor in an area, go back and review the Schweser notes or watch the related video module. We'll have archives of your on-demand classes. If you took the online classes, you can review any part or all or any of those classes right up through exam day through your online dashboard. And the CFA curriculum books. If you feel, gee, I'm just not getting it, Schweser didn't do it for me, the questions didn't do it for me, I don't have any background in this, well, read somebody else's take on it. Go take a look at the curriculum books and how they present it. Maybe that'll do it for you. So this is all this review process and filling in the gaps. Okay? So your final preparations, now we're getting down to the last 2 weeks, right? I don't know if I said it, but we try and finish the curriculum with at least a month, maybe more like 5, 6 weeks prior to the exam, to give time for this review period and practice questions, get your timing down. And quite frankly, some of these topics, there's only so many ways you can ask the question. So just doing those questions, you might see ones on the exam and go, oh, yeah, they tricked me on that before, but I'm not going to get tricked now. Now you can take the Schweser Live mock exam. It's offered around the world by CFA societies, I think 120 plus locations last time I checked. If you can't get to one of those live locations for actual hands-on practice like exam day, under exam day-like circumstances, this mock exam, the Schweser mock, is also available online. We just suggest you take it in 3-hour blocks, 2 3-hour blocks. View the multimedia tutorial for each of the questions, each of the 240 questions in that Schweser mock exam. We've got little tutorials, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever it takes, where we review the topic. So if you missed an exam question, you can go to this tutorial. It's a voiceover with a PowerPoint, calculations and explanations, whatever it is, to help you fill in those gaps in your knowledge in just a super efficient manner. Read the Standards of Practice Handbook again the day before the exam. I know I said it before, it's 15% of the exam. It's mostly short-term memory stuff. So candidates have told me that helps, that it helps a lot. So the 5 steps in the exam preparation process: learn the exam format, topic weights, and put your study plan together. And then, if I haven't mentioned it, you've got to stick to it. If you don't stick to your study plan, it could be the best study plan in the world, but it's not going to do you any good. Learn the material through classes, through videos, through the Schweser notes, through quizzes, through assessment exams, all of that. You practice and retain it with CFA Institute questions and the Q-Bank. And get exam ready, your timing and your exam taking skills for these multiple choice questions, taking as many practice exams as you can fit in. And then, partway through that, I suggest use the 101 must-knows then. And latest part of the season, our review workshops, Schweser mock exam, and the associated multimedia tutorials. So we put it together for you. We're here ready to answer your questions for all of our candidates all the time during the exam season. We think we've put together the absolute best program there is. With our new learning management system, we've integrated those assessment exams, the module exams that follow each reading block from the Schweser notes, and we even bring in previous topics and say, okay, in the middle of accounting, it's time to take a macroeconomics quiz. 12 questions, here it is. Okay? So we've put all these elements of learning science together and made it into a list of tasks. So study hard, stay on your task list, finish up your study with plenty of time for review and lots of questions, and your chances of passing on exam day will be pretty darn high. You know, I want to mention also some of our packages. We offer Schweser Live instruction. We have classroom instruction in New York, London, Hong Kong, Boston, Toronto, DC, many locations worldwide, Middle East, Asia, everywhere. We have online classes that run Eastern Time, London Time, and Hong Kong Time. If you can't get to one of our live class locations, driving, parking, all of that can be troublesome. We offer it online as well. And our instruction packages include the video lectures. So you've got the Schweser notes, and you've got the video lectures, and then when the time comes to take that class, then you revisit it again, and that's all very effective learning. Our premium instruction package, just to give you an idea, it has the Schweser notes, volume 1 through 5. Now these are also available online. You buy it, you get them online as well, so you can study anywhere. You get the video lectures for each section of the Schweser notes. Weekly classes, either classroom or online. The Schweser Pro Q Bank, 4,000 questions or so you can create your own quiz anytime you want. Practice exams, volume 1 and 2, so that's a total of 4 practice exams there. Schweser's Quick Sheet, just a formula sheet and some relations and definitions just to carry around for review. Ask your instructor. Well, that's where you can send in your questions anytime when you get confused about a question, an explanation, or something in the Schweser notes. Our resource library, some supportive material there, and our pass protection you might want to check out so that you can don't have to pay twice to take the exam. At least on our side. You'll have to pay the institute twice. And our Premium Plus package, well, it's all of that, plus we add this Schweser Must Knows, our review book, and exam tips, Schweser Secret Sauce, and your late season review options. These are live or online, our 3-day targeted reviews, which are about half instruction and about half problem solving, how to approach problems. So it really helps right before you get into all the practice exams. And you can upgrade this, if you have a mind to a 5-day review. Everybody tells us 5 days would be better than 3, and we know that, but sometimes it's hard to get away for 5 days. But we do offer a 5-day review or a 7-day review, our residential program up in Windsor, Ontario. Our late season review products, review workshops, April and May for the June exam and October and November for the December exam, and these are live or online. Take a 3-day, 5-day, or 7-day live review as well, and these are offered in many cities worldwide. The 101 Must Knows, I talked to you about the Schweser mock exam with the tutorials and our Schweser Secret Sauce. So if you put in the time and the effort, I think we've got everything you need to efficiently and effectively learn the CFA curriculum material and leave that exam room with a big smile on your face.